All right, so what we are looking at here and what we're going to practice today is using Google Sheets to process our calculations and measurements when doing a scientific study. First, it's important to know that in psychology, psychologists use the same scientific method to conduct research that all other scientists and researchers from all around the world in different disciplines use. The scientific method is a standardized way of making observations, gathering data, forming theories, and interpreting results. Basically, what that means is observation leads to measurement. So, first, let's say that our study is that we're going to measure in a classroom the different scores between male and females on a given test. So first what we do, and this would have happened in the early stages of this study, is we're going to come up with a hypothesis. So let's just say for this hypothesis, female students will score higher than the male students. Now with any study, we also need to have a null hypothesis. Female students will score lower than the male students. So basically what the null is just an alternative hypothesis to our original. Now, like I said, part of the scientific method in conducting research is doing observation. So let's just say I've already collected this data for you. The test has been given and scores have been recorded into this data sheet. Here we can see we have male and female test scores. So the great thing about Google Sheets is that we can quickly compute different numbers to help us better analyze and interpret our data. Typically, what we really focus on in psychology is our mean and standard deviation. Now, the median is also very important to know along with other types of measures of central tendency and variances, but for the purpose of learning today, we're just going to work on these three simple computations. So, to find the mean of a data set, we're first looking here at the males. So under the male category, we see here we have 96, 80, 92, 90, 76, 71, 88, 75, and 88. To find the average of those scores for our male population, we simply type an equal sign followed by the words average. Press enter. Now it wants us to enter values. So we want the values of our male population. So we're going to start here in cell A6, click and drag to the bottom of that data set. So here we can see we're measuring A6 to A14, and again A6 to A14. Simply press enter and we come up with our mean for the male data set at 84. To find the median in a similar fashion, we simply type an equal sign followed by the word median, enter. Same thing, click and drag, and enter. Here we can see the median score for the male population is an 88. Lastly, for standard deviation, again, typing an equal sign. For standard deviation, we're going to type STDEV. Enter. Again, clicking and dragging, enter. So very quickly, in probably less than 1 minute, I was able to compute three different numbers using Google Sheets, which is going to help me conclude my hypothesis in rejecting or failing to reject that statement. So just for more practice here, for the female population, again, we simply, to find the mean, type equals, followed by average. Now this time, of course, we're going to go into the females. So what we're going to do here is we're going to start in cell B6, clicking and dragging to B14. Simply enter, and there we have our average or our mean for the female population. Lastly, I should say secondly, for the median, again, median, we click and drag in the female data cells, enter, standard deviation, STDEV, enter, click and drag. Now, prior to this, I'd already calculated for us the class average, and right now we're not really curious about what the class average means to the rest of our data statistics, but the best, very important part about research is setting ourselves up to do future research. So if ever in the future we want to go back and hypothesize, we already have our class test scores, so maybe next time we want to compare the male scores to the class average. So we're just going to use that next time. So now looking at the male and female scores, we can see that the male's average was a score of 84, and the female's was 83. Going back to our hypothesis, we see that we can guessed that female students will score higher than the male students. So as we can see by using our averages, we see that the male students, in fact, scored higher than the females. For this hypothesis specifically, we're really only curious about the mean, but if we were wondering, just for understanding, we could see, where the male's placed, where the female's placed, and then standard deviation is how these scores in our data set are dispersed around the mean, so how far away they're getting away from our average. And we'll learn more about that later. So again, we can see that the females in fact did score lower, which is counter to our hypothesis, and therefore we would select reject, since the male students did score higher. So in this case, our null hypothesis would be true, and we would want to go back, recollect data, rehypothesize, and test our results again. So this was just a really quick version. The gist of what I want you to know here is just how to simply compute these numbers using data sets in Google Sheets. Lastly for this, what we'll do is just define mean, median, and standard deviation, and what I'd like you to do here is simply just go into a Google search, type mean. Here's what we come up with. Let's do this. Mean, let's go statistics. So in statistics, that single value is the central tendency, and mean, median, mode are always to describe it. The mean, add up all the values in the data set and then divide the number by the total values that you added. Now I don't want that to be word for word, but just type something in here to help yourself remember what the mean, median, and standard deviation are. In future projects, we'll work on inserting charts, which there's all types of charts here that we can work with, but we'll save that for another time. So what I'll have you do is open up a new data sheet that I'll have sent to you with different numbers, and I'll have you go through and practice making the mean, median, and standard deviation, and then using those numbers to decide if we conclude to reject or fail to reject our hypothesis.